Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the Policy Office in the Division of Institution and Award Support at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another day of sessions at the Spring NSF Grants Conference. And I'm now pleased to present this session, which will cover the NSF Directorate for Biological Sciences, and this session will be presented by Doug Levey.
So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this virtual grants conference focusing on the Bio Directorate. My name is Doug Levey. I'm a program officer in the Division of Environmental Biology, and I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. Here's the outline of my talk. I would first like to give you an overview of biology, where it fits in NSF and what its mission is. I'll then spend most of my time talking about different programs and funding opportunities within the Bio Directorate and across different directorates within NSF. And then I'll finally spend some time in talking about how to put together some proposals and how to contact us if you've got any questions. And I'll say that there are many, many different programs in NSF, many new ones, many that may go away after the current year. And there are just too many for me to give very much information about any particular one of them. So please know that this presentation is available to you as a download in a PDF file, and that there are links to pretty much everything I'll be talking about, so that if you want more information about any of these programs, all you need to do is click on the link and go to town. All right, so this is the mission statement for biology. We want to enable discovery to understand life, to help understand the complex systems of life. This cuts across all scales, from molecular all the way to ecosystem. And this theme of understanding how things work across scales of organization is really key to who we are in biology. Having said that, I want to be clear that there's one thing that bio does not support with respect to basic research, and that is biomedical research. This is mainly because we don't want to step on the toes of our sister agency, NIH. That's what they do. But basic research that may have biomedical implications down the road, that's fine. It just shouldn't be biomedically oriented from the get-go, or work on drug discovery or human beings or lab animals. I'll note that there is an exception for this with respect to bioengineering. And that exception is described in the NSF Proposal Awards Procedures and Policies Guide, what we call the PAPG. There's a link to it on the lower right of this screen. And if that might apply to you, I encourage you to read more about that in the PAPG. But I'll simply note that you wouldn't be submitting to biology. In that case, you'd be submitting to the engineering directorate. Okay, this is a list of BIO's funding priorities for 2022. And you'll see these pop up throughout the presentation in various ways. First of all, emerging infectious diseases. We want to know, how do infectious diseases emerge, evolve, spread, and function in hosts? Where do they come from, and where do they go? Secondly, life on a warming planet. How does the warming climate affect all forms of life? What are the feedback loops that instigate further warming? And are there ways that we can harness biological processes to mitigate climate change? Those are some of the big questions. The third one is biotechnology to advance the bioeconomy. We want to spur development of capabilities in biotechnology that drive innovation within the US bioeconomy. Many of these advances are based on basic research in biology, and the challenge, the trick, of course, is to link that basic research to the bioeconomy. The fourth one is integration across the biological sciences. We've been at this for a long time as a priority, so we continue to emphasize it. We want PIs to be able to work across levels of the biological subdisciplines and to do trans and cross-disciplinary work to address big challenges in biology. Our belief is that those big challenges can only be met with this integration approaches. And then finally, broadening participation. We recognize that increasing participation and representation in the STEM workforce is critical to better science, better economic outcomes, and a better workforce. So you'll see lots of examples of these priorities in what I'll be talking about today. But please understand that this is certainly not all that we do or even most of what we do. Basic research is always going to be supported. It's our bread and butter, even if that basic research has nothing directly to do or obviously to do with these 5 big priorities. These priorities are simply where you'll see most of our new programs and new investments being made. All right, so I'll start by talking about the 4 divisions in the Bio Directorate. And these are organized across the different scales of biological organization that I mentioned before. You'll see that in the orange arrow from molecules on the left all the way up to the biosphere on the right. The 4 divisions of bio are shown in the blue bars across the bottom, and they span different areas of these different levels of organization. So molecular and cellular biology, for example, is all the way over on the left, and then integrative organismal systems, or IOS, is in the middle. The division of environmental biology is on the right-hand side, and then the division of biological infrastructure, the 4th one, spans all of them in supporting the infrastructure in the form of tools, resources, and people to make the science possible in the other 3 divisions. You'll notice that there's a lot of overlap in the scales of the biological questions that these divisions support. And that functionally means that no matter where you fall along this span, there is 1 or likely 2 divisions that would be applicable for supporting your research. Another way of thinking about that is that basic research is not going to fall between the cracks because of this overlap. All right, so let's talk about the science programs. I'll first talk about the 4 divisions in bio, what they support and how they're organized, and then I'll broaden it to talk about funding opportunities that involve bio, but cut across to other directorates in NSF, and then I'll also talk about partnerships with other agencies, both US agencies and international agencies. Okay, so we'll start with MCB, Molecular and Cellular Biosciences. Remember, they were on the left side of that slide I showed you a few minutes ago. And I'll show you 1 slide for each of the 4 divisions. They're organized in a similar way. At the top is the core program solicitation. So in this case, NSF 21-509. If you were to submit to any one of the 4 core programs, and these are in the gray bars at the top of this slide, there are 4 of them in MCB. You would submit to that core program solicitation, again, NSF 21-509. And there's lots of information in that solicitation about what these different programs will support. On the bottom of these slides for each of the divisions, I will be listing special programs and tracks. Special programs are defined as, well, being special. They've got their own solicitations and they come and go over time. And I guess that in part defines why they're special. I'm not going to have time to read or talk about any of these, but based upon the titles, if some of them seem interesting to you, you can again click on the title and you'll be taken to the solicitation where you can find out more. So special programs have their own solicitations, they come and go, whereas the core programs are always going to be there for you and are relatively unchanged over time. And then finally, there are tracks, which are special designations within typically the core solicitation. And I'll give you an example of one of those in a few minutes. And I'll talk about some of these special programs in a few minutes as well, but not all of them. The next division is Integrative Organismal Systems, or IOS. It too has 4 programs, but those programs are organized in a bit differently than was the case with MCB. iOS has a lot of what are called clusters. They're more finely divided within each one of these programs. So you can submit to developmental mechanisms under developmental systems, for example. So it's basically the same thing, it's just organized in a bit different way. iOS also has a bunch of special programs. Remember, these have their own solicitations. Some of these special programs are long-standing, like the Plant Genome Research Program, PGRP, that is at the bottom there. Okay, the Division of Environmental Biology is the next one. It also has 4 programs. If you're an ecologist, you're likely to be submitting to one of the programs on the left side, Population and Community Ecology or Ecosystem Sciences. If what you study is more along the lines of evolution, you'll be submitting to one of the 2 on the right, likely. DEB has a lot of special programs too. I want to highlight a track, which I've not given an example of yet, and that's the small grants track. This is defined as budgets up to $200,000. The idea is to give smaller scale studies a chance when they go head to head with much larger and seemingly more flashy projects in a given panel. So this is something that is specific to the DEB core solicitation. You may notice that right next to it, Organismal Response to Climate Change, or ORCC, was also listed as a special program in iOS. That's not unusual. There's often overlap with special programs among divisions. Okay, and then finally, the last division in bio is DBI, or the Division of Biological Infrastructure. And its goal is to build a robust and resilient national infrastructure that advances fundamental biology across all the levels of organization. It's divided into 3 clusters, one that focuses on supporting people, mostly at early career stages, one that supports relatively small scale infrastructure, and the one that supports mid to large scale infrastructure. So rather than trying to define these, let me just give you an example of one of the latter, a large scale infrastructure project that is funded through DBI, managed through DBI. So this is NEON, the National Ecological Observatory Network. Each of those yellow dots represents observatory. There are 20 of them. And at each of these, lots of ecological data are collected in a highly standardized way and made publicly available, often in real time. This allows scientists to explore all sorts of questions on a continental scale and ask questions that they alone could not answer, looking at something at a much smaller scale. This is a 30-year commitment that'll help us meet our priorities in mitigating climate change. We'll be able to understand more about how climate is changing and what the biological and ecological impacts are. It'll also help us predict and follow pandemics, since these observatories cover such a wide geographic range and also represent many, many different types of ecosystems. All right, so those are the four different divisions and where they fall with respect to each other. I want to step back for a minute and point out that none of the core solicitations, so if you're applying to one of those four divisions, none of those have deadlines anymore. This is relatively new. You can submit your proposal when it's ready. And there's no limit on the number of proposals that a PI or co-PI can submit, as long as they're not duplicates, of course. And the review process is really pretty much unchanged from the days when we had deadlines for the core proposals. In other words, the proposals are sent out to expert reviewers, which are called ad hocs, and they're reviewed by panelists in panel, recently virtual panels, of course. We have many panels per year, and if you're a PI, you can expect a decision on your proposal within roughly 6 months, rarely 8 months. Again, this is relatively new. We'd like to know how it's working for you. If you're interested in know how it's working for us, we can have a back and forth about that during the question and answer period. So I've talked about the four divisions in bio, and now I want to step back and give you some examples of the sorts of programs that we fund outside of the division, outside of particular divisions. So they span across bio, they're bio-wide programs. And these two blue arrows on the bottom of this slide, programs that go across directorates at NSF. So they're even broader. And or that involve other agencies of the federal government or other international collaborators. The first of these bio-wide programs is about integrative biology. We just finished a competition for what are called integration institutes. These are very big awards, $12.5 million each over 5 years, to support large collaborative teams to explore thorny biological problems that require approaches that integrate across all scales and disciplines. That deadline has come and gone. It may be renewed for next year. It's hard to tell. Stay tuned on that. There's a smaller version that is available and will be available, I suspect, for a long time, called IntBio, Integrative Research in Biology, that supports research that requires integration. Typically, this means it would be reviewed by at least two of the divisions in bio. It wouldn't comfortably fit within a single one. And those are fairly large budgets. Again, I'll draw your attention to the links to the solicitations there, where you can learn more about these. The next one is supported by DBI, Division of Biological Infrastructure. These are postdoctoral fellowships in biology. This is a long-standing program with deadlines in mid-December, usually. There are tracks within this solicitation. These tracks change over time, so it's important to keep an eye on them. Currently, the 3 tracks are broadening participation for individuals from groups underrepresented in biology. Again, these are postdoctoral fellowships. The second one is integrative research. So specifically understanding interactions between genomes, environment, and phenotypes, the links between those, and then plant genome, anything that has to do with figuring out the genome of plants and the function of that genome. So if you're going to apply for one of these, your research has to fall within one of those tracks currently. But again, these tracks change over time. These 3 solicitations are new and are focusing on the priority of broadening participation. The first one is building research capacity of new faculty in biology, what we call BRIC Bio. And this is for assistant professors at institutions that are not research intensive. So primarily undergraduate institutions, tribal colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, many minority serving institutions, basically places that don't have a lot of startup funds available for their new assistant professors. We would like to help those assistant professors get their feet on the ground and their research going to establish strong labs. Oftentimes, these are individuals from underrepresented groups, although not always. The second program is research and mentoring for post-baccalaureates in biological sciences, or what we call the RAMP solicitation. This is to provide research mentoring and training for recent college graduates who did not get research experience while they were an undergraduate. That may have been because their institution closed down labs due to COVID, but it could be for any other reason. For example, that they're at a small tribal college and they don't have a sense of really what doing STEM research is about. So this provides a one-year fellowship for them to work in the lab of a mentor to learn what it's like to be a scientist doing research in biology. These are cohort grants, kind of like an REU site grant, except for post-baccalaureate students who come into an institution in cohorts of 8 to 12 individuals. So there's peer support in this program. And then the final one is leading cultural change through professional societies, or LEAPS. And this is for professional societies to be the leaders in culture change with respect to equity, diversity, and inclusion. What we've realized is that individuals, not even from underrepresented groups, but pretty much all early career individuals go through stages where they can lose track of people in their past, important mentors or institutions, but professional societies provide continuity to them and can provide leadership and oversight and organization and facilitate peer-to-peer support in ways that are unique. And so we want to invest in that, and the LEAPS program we feel is a good way of doing that. So I encourage you to check all of those out. Now I'm stepping back. So everything that I talked about thus far were programs that were restricted to biology. Now I'd like to talk about programs, funding opportunities that span beyond biology into other directorates. And there are different mixes of directorates in all of these. The first one is Dynamics of Integrated Socio-Environmental Systems, or DICES. If you're familiar with CNH, Coupled Natural Human Systems, this is what CNH has turned into. The focus is on integrating across environmental and human components of biological systems. And the focus is on processes and dynamics. And I've got dynamics underlined there because in a nutshell, that's what separates CNH from DICES. DICES is more focused on the dynamics between the social and the environmental components of these projects. The next two are kind of like DICES in that they focus on social environmental dynamics. Coastlines and People, what we call COPE, focuses on coastal communities. And it's integrating, again, biological and social perspectives, but it also involves technological processes. And the goal is to increase the resilience of coastal areas. So obviously this is focused on coastal areas, usually urban centers. This one is just finishing up this year. It's likely to be renewed for next year, but nothing is certain until the solicitation comes out. And then finally, Navigating the New Arctic is similar in that it again looks at social, environmental interactions, but also from the perspective of what we call convergence research. What is convergence research? There's a link there that'll tell you all about it, but in a nutshell, it's integrative research that's focused on solving complex problems that involve societal needs, impacts of climate change, for example. It requires knowledge, methods, expertise from different disciplines to form novel frameworks. So new, more holistic and inclusive approaches to tackling thorny problems. That, in a nutshell, is what navigating the new Arctic is about. All right, the next one applies to you if you're at a primarily undergraduate institution. NSF has a solicitation specifically for you. It's been unchanged for a long time, and from our perspective, it's unchanged because it's working pretty well. And through this solicitation, you would submit to the core programs. In our case, any of the core programs in biology. And the structure of the proposal is largely the same, but you put it in the perspective of what your opportunities and constraints are being at a primarily undergraduate institution. And one of the things I want to make clear here is that on NSF's side, we understand that if you're an individual at a primarily undergraduate institution, you're not going to have a publication record as somebody at a Research One institution. And that is okay. You will still be competitive. It's the science we're looking at. Going forward, we don't look back so much at the publication record. If you're an individual at a primarily undergraduate institution, you should also know about ROAs, Research Opportunity Awards. It's a bit of a misnomer in that they're not awards, they're not grants that you apply for and get yourself, but rather they're supplements to existing awards to PIs at a different institution, normally or typically a Research One institution or a large institution. If you know of a PI who has an award already in a field that interests you, you can ask them to apply for a supplement to that award that would support you to participate in the science in their lab that is supported by that award. So it's a way to get your foot in the door. And I encourage you to see the PAPG, and there's also a Dear Colleague letter, abbreviated as DCL, that tells you more about that. One of the things that we do across NSF is to make sure that individuals don't fall between the cracks with respect to career advancement. We like to think that we've got something for everyone. Career awards are the crown jewel of what we do for beginning investigators or early career scientists. You don't have to be a beginning or new investigator, just early career, which we define as pre-tenure, but in a tenure track. The emphasis on career awards is in integrating teaching and research. In a nutshell, we want to create and empower teacher scholars. And the career proposals that truly sparkle are the ones where the teaching informs the research and the research informs the teaching. Typically, it's not a big deal for PIs to incorporate their research into their teaching, but it's more of a challenge for them to have the teaching inspire or synergize the research in an open-minded way. I'd like to point out a new program called Mid-Career Advancement, or MCAs. This is something that is going to be coming around every year, we're pretty sure. This is aimed at associate professors with at least 3 years in that rank. What we found is that at a lot of institutions, once assistant professors get tenure and become associate professors, they got a lot more responsibilities, administrative responsibilities in particular, that slows down the research progress and also may hinder their ability to keep up to date with new techniques. And so essentially they can get stuck in this associate professor period. And so these mid-career advancement programs are essentially like mini sabbaticals that allow retooling of these associate professors in collaboration with a partner, typically at another institution. In fact, I think always at another institution, who can help them reestablish their career trajectory. So I encourage you to take a look at that solicitation. The last special program that I'll talk about is plant biotic interactions. And this is a program in collaboration with USDA NIFA. And it is to look at all sorts of beneficial and antagonistic interactions between plants and pretty much any living thing that interacts with them. It's very broad. The systems can be model agricultural or non-model, and they can be fundamental biology, or they can be more applied with respect to agriculture. And funding for the awards can come from any mix of NSF and USDA NIFA. Okay, signals in the soil. This is another interagency and international even approach to understanding what's going on in the soil from a biological standpoint, also from a physical standpoint. It focuses on sensor systems. So wireless systems to collect and transmit data, cyber systems, all sorts of ways that we can understand both the physical and biological interactions in the soil. EEID, Ecology and Evolution of Infectious Diseases, is one that has been around for a long time, and it's very recently, perhaps not surprisingly, expanded in scope with respect to its partners. So right now it's NSF, NIH, USDA, and then even the UK and Israel and China. And this supports all research that has to do with the ecology and evolution of infectious disease. And the focus is quantitative and computational understanding of pathogen transmission. Okay, and then EDGE is another program that is between NSF and in this case, NIH. The idea here, the goal is to connect genotype to phenotype and looking at how environment influences that in non-model organisms. So it focuses on developing tools and approaches that can benefit research communities that apply these tools to non-model organisms. It's hypothesis-driven, and it focuses on mechanisms underlying complex traits. All right, so that's a brief overview of a lot of the different science programs. Let me talk briefly about proposals and funding, what you do if you're a PI, how you find out more information. You need to be familiar with two documents, the PAPG, which I've already mentioned, Proposal and Awards Facilities, Policies and Procedures Guide, and then the solicitation that you're applying to. The PAPG is really an essential document, and that provides all sorts of basics about how to apply for grants to NSF. And these are rules and guidelines that apply no matter what solicitation you apply to. It describes, importantly, what we mean by intellectual merit and broader impacts, which I'll be talking more about in just a minute. But those are the two merit criteria by which all proposals are evaluated. And then the solicitation has all the particular details that are relevant to the program that you're applying to. So deadline, it'll tell you a bit about the goals of the program. So a synopsis, who to contact if you've got questions, eligibility, budget limitations, and typical sizes of awards. How do you find out about funding opportunities? Well, go to nsf.gov, and in the top menu bar, you will see a link for research areas that lists all the different directorates, and the top one is bio. So if you click on that, then you're taken to a drop-down menu that will list staff in biology. So that provides contact information. The four arrows at the bottom show you the different divisions within bio, and will tell you more about their special programs and what they support. I frankly like the awards search better because it gives you a sense of what we're actually funding. So if you go to the awards drop down and then do search awards, you'll be given search boxes where you can type in keywords and get a long list of proposals that presumably are close to your interests. You can download them as an Excel sheet. You can sort them however you want. There'll be links to award information, including abstracts of the award, the budget, who the PI is, all sorts of useful information. Alternatively, you can go to the funding dropdown and you can do a similar search for different solicitations. But in my experience, that's a bit more tricky, especially for some of these interagency and cross-disciplinary funding opportunities. All right, so what's a strategy for writing a successful proposal? I'm sure many of you have seen something like this before. You want to identify who your audience is. So both individuals who are experts in your field, those will be ad hoc reviewers, and then also individuals who have a much broader view of your discipline. Those are likely to be the panelists. You need to write to both of those in a very accessible manner. You want to paint a big picture, explaining what the big deal is about whatever you want to study, and what are some of the things that are holding up advancement to answer that big question or tackle that big problem. Describe how you're going to solve that problem or fill those gaps, emphasizing new and different novel approaches perhaps. If you can provide proof of concept or data, preliminary data, that always helps. Describe what you expect to find, and then don't forget at the end to circle back to whatever that big picture is and explain again how you're going to help tackle that. The merit review criteria, there's a lot that is written on these, but every proposal is evaluated on these two criteria. Intellectual merit, the potential to advance knowledge, it's pretty easy to spot. Broader impacts is a bit harder to define, but the potential to benefit society. And there are many different ways of doing that. I encourage you to read more about that and talk to your colleagues about how they've done it. The proposal submission process, I'm sure you've seen cycles like this before. Either you get awarded on the first time, which is rare, quite frankly, or you circle back and it takes a couple times getting feedback from the review process to craft a successful proposal. The reason I'm showing you this cycle is the boxes where it says talk to a program director. We're not scary people. We want to hear from you. We can help. We can help you identify special programs. We can tell you more about what the core programs might be looking for. We can explain the priorities, for example. So we can help you at an early stage. What we suggest is you send us a one-page description of what you have in mind, and then we can give you feedback on that. And then if your proposal is declined, we're happy to talk to you about the specifics of what panelists said. Panelists, of course, will remain anonymous, but we take notes on that discussion and can help contextualize why the decision was made that was made. All right, finally, how to reach us. We're not hard to get a hold of. We want to be accessible to you. We want you to stay informed. You can sign up for any of our blogs. BioBuzz is across all of biology, and then the next four listed there are specific to the different divisions. You can also sign up for NSF alerts. These are all hot links here, and follow us on social media. We have virtual office hours every month. Every division has an office hour every month on rotating topics. For example, we'll have one on career proposals coming up sometime this summer. So you should sign up for announcements about what these topics are month to month. And you can do that through the blog sites that I just showed you on the previous slide. And then finally, work with us. We always need reviewers. We always need panelists. We like to bring new people into the system. If you're interested in being a program director, contact one of us. If you're interested in being a reviewer or panelist, contact a program director. And I should say that program directors and program officers are the same thing. We use those terms interchangeably. If you're interested in being a rotating a rotating program officer, again, contact existing program officer. A rotating program officer is an individual who comes in for typically a 2-year period and does everything that any other program officer would do. And then they go back to their home institutions. So it's kind of like a sabbatical, but working at NSF. There's a lot of information about it. There's a hot link there with a recent blog post if you're interested. And I'll stop there and take questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. One of the things I just wanted to make note of is, Doug, in the questions that you answered, you rightly pointed people to the solicitation for many items, and it's a point to emphasize that the solicitation will be very clear about the requirements for that program, including whether your type of organization is indeed eligible to submit proposals. So there are standard eligibility criteria that the PAPG has, but remember that solicitations can modify those criteria and can modify eligibility criteria. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about these programs. You always want to go to the solicitation. Make sure you're looking at the most recent version of the solicitation as well. So I'm going to go, Doug, and just go through these questions here. First one is a good question. It's asking, who do you contact if you're not sure in which program in biological sciences you should be submitting to, especially if it can kind of cross over in a number of different disciplines?
Yeah, and thanks for asking that question, Heather. That's one of the most common questions we get. And my advice is just start somewhere. Don't be timid. Look at the list of program officers for the division or program that you think most closely aligns with what your interests are, and contact them. It's very helpful if you would send a one-page description, what we call a one-pager, of whatever your research proposal is likely to be. And with that in hand, they can advise you about how closely that topic fits within a particular program. And they will also be very helpful in pointing out whether it might be appropriate for one of the special programs that I've talked about. Those special programs come and go. It's even hard for us to keep track of which ones are available. So we can look up that information very easily, and we also, if appropriate, can put you in contact with a program officer who might be involved in those special programs. So the bottom line is that we are contacted very frequently by PIs, very often early career PIs, who are looking for direction in where to submit a particular proposal. Don't be shy about asking.
Great. Next question is asking about reviews and feedback for reviewers. And so how does one become proficient at reviewing proposals?
Yeah, you become proficient by practice. We do not provide feedback on individual reviews, and this is mainly because agency-wide we get tens of thousands of them per year, and we just can't provide a review of reviews. The sorts of reviews that are most helpful are, as you might guess, not the ones that are incredibly long and detailed, and not the ones that are very, very short, but somewhere in between, the Goldilocks kind of review, where the reviewer focuses on the most important strengths and weaknesses of both the intellectual merit and broader impacts. If you're asked to review a proposal, Fastlane or research.gov will give you a template to fill out about the strengths and weaknesses of intellectual merit and broader impacts, and also any specific review criteria that may be appropriate for the particular solicitation. And then they'll ask you to provide a summary statement as well that kind of ties everything together and justifies whatever your rating is. Different people have different styles, different reviewers have different styles, and that's just fine. Again, what we focus on are the strengths and weaknesses. If you've never reviewed an NSF proposal before, and this is very often the case for early career PIs, write to a program officer in the program that you think is most closely aligned with your interests. Send them a copy of your CV or a link to your website and make it clear that you would love to be involved in the review process. What beginning investigators most often benefit the most from is being on a panel where you essentially get to see how everything works, how the sausage is made. Most programs will not invite somebody to be on a panel unless that person has done some ad hoc reviews previously. So an ad hoc review is like reviewing a manuscript for a journal. You read the proposal and you submit the review, and then essentially you're done with it. When you get invited to be on a panel, you do that on steroids. You do it for a bunch of different proposals. In Division of Environmental Biology, with virtual panels, panelists can expect to provide reviews for 8 to 10 proposals at a time. I hope that answers the question.
Great answer. So the next question is asking if a funded project would affect the review of a current proposal and the decision-making process that you as an NSF program officer make.
So it could. And I'm going to assume that when you're talking about a funded project, you're talking about a funded project of your own. So if you have an active NSF award from a particular division and you've submitted another proposal to that same program, this is one of the things that we call portfolio balancing, where if your proposal gets good reviews, but there are other proposals that get equally good reviews from PIs who are not currently funded, we tend to try to spread our money around. So if all else is equal and you already have support, we would be more likely to provide new funding to somebody who did not currently have support. So it's not a black and white thing, but we do, I think, across the entire biology directorate, we tend to favor PIs who are not already well funded by NSF.
Great. We have somebody asking if we have a date for the planned presentation that you mentioned. I believe you mentioned on the NSF career program for bio. Is that something that
so that's,
you have? Yeah,
I don't know what the date is, but I'm quite sure it's been set. This is the bio office hours, and you would get that date by looking at the Bio Buzz blog, or you could go to the division that you would be applying to and look at their blog. The links to those blogs are provided in the PDF file of the talk that you just watched.
Right, and there's a lot of information on the NSF website, whether it's the events calendar or individual program pages. Again, I answered a question just a second ago about contact information for program officers. All NSF staff contact information, including emails and phone numbers, are available on the NSF website, and you can drill down by division and program to find the appropriate contact. So go ahead and do that. Next question is asking, are researchers in non-academic institutions like federal agencies, museums, eligible for the early career or mid-career programs? Again, I'll answer and say that you really need to look at the eligibility sections of the program solicitation that you're interested in, because it will spell out who is eligible to apply. For the faculty early career program, for example, both institutions of higher education and nonprofit organizations that include museums and so forth are eligible. But for any solicitation, you'd want to make sure you're checking the eligibility information, not just for your organization, but also who may serve as a PI, because there may be limitations on how many PIs, how many proposals the PI can submit, or the number of proposals that an organization can submit. So that's something to take a look at. I don't know if you wanted to add anything specific to bio there, Doug.
Well, the only thing that I would add is that if you work for a federal agency, you are unlikely to be eligible to receive money from NSF Bio. And that's because it doesn't make much sense for one federal agency to fund the work of another federal agency. The only exception to that I know about is the Smithsonian Institution, which is partly federally supported and then partly supported through an endowment. So depending upon where you fit in the Smithsonian, you may or may not be eligible to apply in bio. But certainly NGOs, nonprofits, almost certainly you would be.
Okay, next question is asking about, I guess, kind of the difference between funding between NSF and NIH, and how proposers should approach focusing on science and engineering and less on health and clinical practice. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that delineation.
And this is another very common question. There's a big gray area, and we take it on a case-by-case basis. At least in the division that I'm in, Division of Environmental Biology, we don't approach that line very often, but I'm sure that in molecular and cellular biology, they do all the time. And I'm hesitant to speak on their behalf about where they draw the line between biomedical and NSF basic research. So my advice would be to, again, send a one-page description of what you have in mind to a program officer who is in the division, or even better, the program that you would be applying to. Again, it's not black and white.
And I'm going to try and interpret this next question, which is asking about an open review cycle, for funding opportunities. I guess perhaps it's asking if if it's always happening on a regular type of calendar or intervals. But I'm not entirely sure what that question is asking.
So I think I know what that's getting at. We very often are asked, when is the best time in a calendar year to submit a proposal? And with this no deadline system, we accumulate proposals until we have enough for a panel, and we space those panels evenly throughout the year. So we don't know exactly when we're going to have a panel, but there is always going to be a panel within roughly 3 to 4 months of when you submit. You might be lucky, you might be unlucky in waiting a shorter or longer period of time. But in general, we do a very good job of sticking to this notification of our decision within 6 months after submission. So the most pithy advice I can give here is submit your proposal when it is ready, when you feel confident about it. And don't worry about the timing on our end. There's no advantage or disadvantage to submitting at a particular time of year. So don't think of it as a review cycle. It's a continuous sort of thing.
Yeah, so we have time for one more question. And the one I'd like to ask is actually a question we've received quite a bit over the course of this week. And that's asking, especially for, or specifically for bio, on the cover sheet, there's a box to check for beginning investigator. So the question is asking, how is this considered during the review process?
We like to spread our money around as much as possible. So if you are a PI who has never had NSF funding and your proposal is rated equally to other proposals of PIs who have had lots of funding, it will definitely work to your advantage. There is unfortunately some confusion about what constitutes a beginning PI. Whether if, for example, you have funding from a different agency, EPA, for example, whether that might count against you or whether you can count, whether that counts in terms of being a beginning investigator for NSF. That's why we also look at the current and pending support document, which PIs are required to submit. So again, this is getting into the weeds, but in general, we tend to favor individuals who are submitting for the first time or have not been funded previously.
Right. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank you, Doug, and thank all of you for attending, and have a great rest of your day.